The marathon is a fascinating race distance. To finish your first marathon, you're going to have to learn to break some physiological limits that you've never had to deal with. Your body does not normally store enough readily available energy to run that far. That means that your brain will tell you that you're dying or you need to stop or some version of that. Anybody who's actually run a marathon will now be nodding their heads going, yes, it does. This is going to create a big psychological barrier that you're going to have to push through because you're not really dying. Your brain's just telling you that to try and get you to slow down. So now you've got a physiological limit and you got a psychological limit. That's why Emil Zatopek came out with this famous saying that if you listen to our episode on Emil Zatopek, you'll know what we're talking about. He said, if you want to run a mile. If you want to experience a different life, run a marathon. If you try to run a PR for the marathon, you're going to have to be careful and courageous in equal measure. That wasn't Emil Zatopek. That was Alan saying that bit. And you'll probably need all the advice in today's book. Hi, and welcome to Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can keep you motivated about your own running and maybe inspire you to try something new in your running. My name is Alan, and with my co-host Liz, we're going to talk with author Chris Knighton about his book, Run Faster Marathons.
As the title would suggest, Run Faster Marathons is dedicated to providing advice that you can incorporate into your marathon training to make you faster. The information is divided into 3 categories. Essential concepts for marathon success, which talks about knowing your why, some running rules, the right way to increase mileage, improving running form, and the importance of a good warm-up. The next section is the 6 phases of marathon training, which explains each of the 6 phases of marathon training, starting with base building and ending with post-race recovery, because the marathon doesn't finish when you cross the finish line. And the third section is supplemental practices to go beyond just running, which talks about strength training, stretching, massage, and choosing running shoes. This book is just the facts without all the stories about study results, etc., and so you can read it quickly and get started with implementing some of the advice. A little bit about the author. Chris Knighton is a USATF Level 1 coach. He is the head coach at Knighton Runs Marathon Coaching and track and field and cross-country coach at St. Mary's Academy in Riverside, Rhode Island. Knighton Runs Marathon Coaching was founded in the summer of 2019, and their mission is to help passionate athletes run faster marathons and develop their confidence to take on any life challenge. Born in Boston, Massachusetts, Chris did not start running until his late 20s, but grew up watching the Boston Marathon, which is what inspired him to try and qualify. He has been a vegan athlete for his entire adult life and credits much of his success in sports to making healthy diet and lifestyle choices. In 2014, Chris left a soul-crushing job to pursue his dreams. He thru-hiked the 2,180-mile Appalachian Trail that summer and realized if he had the courage and capacity to accomplish this journey, he should easily be able to take on any life challenge. Chris brings this mentality to his own running and coaching. He believes that the skills and confidence we develop to run faster marathons directly correlate to what's needed to overcome any personal or professional challenge. Outside of running, he's also a husband and father to a 9-month-old baby girl. So welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Thanks, Liz. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
It's our pleasure. And so we always start with what made you decide to write this book?
Yeah, I wrote this book after I had been working as a running coach. Actually, it's something I started as a side hustle along my old career as an engineer. And then I had gone through a transition of growing my running business, loving it, leaving my old career to pursue coaching full time. And as I became a bit more experienced as a coach and started working with more and more athletes, I realized that though athletes benefit so much from one-on-one personal attention, so many of the questions that we ask as runners are universal questions that everyone asks. And what's interesting about running is it's such a simple sport, but it's also very confusing when you try to look up any topic related to running online. Just a simple Google search for kind of anything we talk about in my book here, you're going to get wildly different answers. And it's hard to figure out, what to believe and what to just kind of ignore, and how to develop a comprehensive training program that's going to make you the best athlete that you can be. So I found that my athletes kept on asking me these kind of questions. And I thought back to when I was just getting into running and I decided to train for my first marathon. This is actually when I decided to hire a coach for the first time, because before I hired a coach, I really didn't know what I was doing. My running was such a mishmash of different strategies or theories, or whatever was the latest thing that I watched on YouTube or saw on a message board post. There was no consistency to it. I was just trying this or that, kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall, and it worked a little bit, but there was no unifying theory behind what I was doing. I didn't really know why I was doing the different things I was doing. So I wanted to write a book that was for my athletes, a primer for everything that I believe in, that I can just hand to an athlete, whether I'm just starting working with them or, someone who's just finds out about me. They can find this book and learn everything you need to know about running a marathon. But I wanted to provide it in a straightforward and simple way. This is a short book. It's about a 120-page book, but I really think it contains just about everything you need to know to really understand how to train for a marathon, both mentally and physically, without, kind of all the fluff and the stories and digging into the science. It's just what you need to know to train like an athlete.
And how did you, I guess like the first question would be, how did you get into coaching? Like you started off as a runner and hiring a coach because you wanted to run a better marathon, but then how did you get into coaching?
I guess if you were an engineer beforehand, this explains everything. I mean, people who are engineers just want to get out and do other things. Isn't that right, Liz?
No comment.
Oh, okay. Liz,
No,
Liz
yes.
has an
It's
engineering
actually
degree.
Alan, you nailed it on the head for me.
I've just lost all our
Interesting.
readers or all our listeners who are engineers now. Sorry, guys, I didn't mean it. Come back to the podcast.
Engineering can be fantastic if you find the right environment to do it in.
Were either of you engineers?
So
Are engineers?
I did an engineering degree. I started in nursing. I don't know if our listeners even know any of this, but I started in nursing and I quit nursing in 2009 to go to engineering school. And I did. So I did the engineering school and graduated and everything. But then in my work search, so I had one contract job, which I completed. And then in my search for the next job, I was not very patient. I mean, it was just a whole bunch of online applications. I think I had applied to like 80 different positions on the island of Montreal, and just never had any response, like no interviews, like it was as if I was throwing these into the wind or like into a fireplace and they were just burning. And so eventually, I guess I wasn't out of the window where you could get your license back, because in every profession there's a window, right? So I was here. It's I think it's like if you don't practice for 5 years, I think that you have to go back to school as a nurse, but I hadn't exceeded that. So I did end up applying for my license again because I ended up getting this offer, which is the job that I ended up staying at until now, like almost 8 years later. So yeah, that's kind of how it happened for me. But I definitely enjoyed the engineering education, but I know that I did a few work environments, and they're not always easy in some ways.
That was kind of my experience too. So in the bio you read for me at the beginning, I didn't start running until I was probably 26. Didn't really start doing it seriously until I was probably 28. Did no sports in high school at all. Like I actually remember this when I was very young, like 5th grade. I thought I wanted to be a runner. And there was this running club in school for middle school, but you had to be 7th grade to do it. So I remember waiting and just like waiting all through fifth grade, all through sixth grade. Couldn't wait to do running club. When I got to running club in seventh grade, I went to the first day. And that's when I found out that it was the distance running club. And I didn't want to be a distance runner.
Oh, you wanted to be a sprinter.
Every kid, and now I'm a high school coach, I realize this, just about every kid, whether they're naturally one or not, they want to be a sprinter. And that's what I did as well. So we went out for, I don't know, maybe a 2 or 3 mile run on the first day. I was terribly unprepared. I didn't even have running shoes. I don't even know what I had. Not something good. I went back one second day after that, and I think I made it about a quarter mile into the run. And then I just ran away. Ran away, and I never went back to the club. And that was my only running experience as a youth. To tie this back around, what made me a running coach and the whole engineering bit, I was always kind of, I guess, maybe a bit of a rebel in high school. I didn't do extracurriculars, didn't really want to, just wanted to be out of school at 3:00 and do my own thing. But I was a good student, good at math, good at science. I knew I wanted to make some kind of a difference in the world. So I went to college for engineering. I was really passionate about climate change activism at that time and environmentalism. And I studied energy technologies. I wanted to work with renewable energy. This was 2006. And I thought, this will be my thing. This will be me aligning my passion with my livelihood. Anyway, I pretty quickly learned around my sophomore year that I didn't really fit in with the other engineers. All through college, actually all my friends were not engineers, but they ended up being political activists outside of school, people who were working on causes that were meaningful to them and bettering their communities. So I was just kind of this outsider, and I worked a couple of engineering jobs after school, had some experience working on renewable energy projects, energy efficiency projects, that kind of thing. But it was too impersonal for me. And I never really felt like, though maybe it was doing some good for the world, it wasn't really aligned with what I wanted to do. And I just didn't get personal satisfaction from it. I started, you had mentioned, I had a job that was causing me a ton of stress. I ended up quitting that job after working there for a few years out of college, saving a lot of money and kind of paying off my college loans. I felt so free at that point. I went on a 6-month hike on the Appalachian Trail on the east coast of the United States. And for those who don't know, it's a backpacking trail that famously a lot of people with no hiking experience just up and quit their jobs and they go hike this trail that's 2,000 miles long.
That's fantastic.
90% of the people who start it never finish. Probably because 90% of the people who start it have no experience backpacking and it's just this wild dream. And to be honest, I had no experience backpacking either, but I loved it. And I just fell in love with the experience of getting up each day, walking through the woods, making forward progress physically. And it just felt so good, probably to get in shape for the first time in my life. I was never an unhealthy person, but I wouldn't say I was in shape. And I definitely wasn't an athlete. But when you're hiking 20 miles a day, you get in shape pretty quick. And it just mentally felt really good. It was so rewarding to just accomplish just the act of moving forward, as simple as that is, and moving through physical space and overcoming physical challenges just felt so good. And the people I met along the way, I loved it. I loved it. I loved the people I was around.
And something about the visual progress, because like you can see on a map how far you've gone, and it just makes, I guess coming from a corporate job where it was hard to see any progress or any benefit that you were creating, this is sort of like, you exactly get that.
So when I kind of got back from the trail and, was out of money, didn't have a job, had to figure out what's next with my life, that's when I got into running. I wanted a way to continue the physical experience of, it wasn't even about sport at that point. It was just about being outside and moving and adventure through movement. Running just was a natural next step. And kind of in a weird way of getting into running, my first race was actually a 50K ultra marathon trail race.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't like the typical road 5K or anything like that. At that point, I had no interest in road running, though now that's what I love, that and track. But, I figured, hey, I would hike 20 miles a day, sometimes more. So if I can do that, see if I can do this 50K trail race. Did that for a few months, had mixed levels of success, but really enjoyed it. And then I decided, I I want to do a marathon. I've always told myself in my head, I would say I can do a marathon. Like I know I can do a marathon. And maybe I don't need to do a marathon though, because I know I can do a marathon. But just saying
Especially
that,
after doing a 50K
yeah.
trail race.
But just saying that, right? It's like,
Oh, talk is
sure, it's
cheap,
like,
huh?
yeah, talk's cheap. Like I signed up for my first marathon. And it was kind of at this point where I learned about the Boston qualifier process, which is so attractive for so many of us amateur runners. And my qualifying time was 3:05. And I was like, hey, this isn't out of the realm of possibility. But if I'm going to do this, I need to do it right. Like, I'm not going to go through the effort of training for a marathon and just keep winging it like I've been winging it this whole time. I never ran in school. I have no athletic training. I don't understand how training works. I didn't even read a book on marathon running or anything. It's just copied what I saw other people doing and didn't really understand it. So I hired my first coach, and she really taught me how to run like an athlete for the first time. Prior to this, I'd never really done workouts. If I did, it was maybe just like some tempo I made up on the spot, or I just go to the track and run fast when I felt like it. There was no structure. But I started doing structured workouts. There was a logical progression to what I was doing. I had someone to talk to when, maybe what was on my training plan didn't match how I felt that day, or I needed to change, maybe I had doubts. I had someone to talk to, and I really enjoyed that relationship. And she helped me through my first marathon. In some ways had a very successful race. In other ways, it was a struggle. Like first marathon's a learning experience.
And the second marathon, and the third marathon, and the fourth marathon.
And it still is a struggle. The marathon I've still not mastered, even though I've written this book on it. Anyway, I just love that experience so much. And frankly, I did not enjoy my engineering career, that I started coaching some friends just as a thing on the side, just to learn about it. And, I didn't feel like I was learning and growing at my engineering job. I didn't feel challenged. I didn't feel like I was doing very meaningful work. But the running, teaching other people to go through the experience that I went with my first coach, Samantha, I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. So I slowly grew it over time. And, thankfully it got to a point where financially I was able to make the switch and dive into that full time. I left my old corporate job, and I've been coaching full time through my online based marathon coaching business for coming up on 2 years now. And about a year and a half ago, my wife and I became high school coaches at a local girls' high school. So now we split our time between, I guess I'm an online marathon coach by day and a high school girls track and field and cross country coach by afternoon and weekend. And I just love it. I feel like work for me, the vast majority of the work I do now is fun and totally aligned with what I want to be doing.
Yeah, you can tell just listening to you, and we have the added advantage of some video so we can see your face. You can see you just, even while you're talking about it, you're lighting up. And I guess I understand, and Liz does too. We understand, the feeling of moving, and when running outside, and when the workout is working, and your body's doing the thing that you weren't exactly sure maybe it could do, maybe it can't do, and it does it, and the feeling that gives you, and you just want everybody to have that feeling. You go, oh, that person, if they would just try a bit of running, they could be an entirely different person. They'd have a different outlook on their life, and that person wouldn't have these problems, and that person wouldn't worry about that. They could just go out for a run, and that person wouldn't have stress. And everybody should be a runner. And I can see
because we can all solve all of our problems with running.
Exactly, I think exactly what you went through.
It
Basically,
is.
you love the outdoors so much. You got into running via that, and now that you're into running via that, you want everybody to have what you have.
Yeah, I guess that's the case. And the other part of it too, and when I wrote my book, it's kind of written for this type of runner in mind. Is I really want to be able to help runners who kind of went through that transformation that I went through, where, I like to speak to someone, work with someone who is a runner, but they want to go from being a runner to training like an athlete, and really kind of start adding in the additional things that are going to make them, more competitive and closer to their true potential. Not to say that there's anything wrong with just going out and running and doing it socially or whatever, but I personally also when I got into this, really enjoyed the competitive aspect of it. It's something I never had before. I never did sports, like I said, and it's just fun. I love that aspect of it. I love racing and these little things that can make you a better racer and better performer. A lot of fun.
It's funny because a lot of people will be like, oh no, but I'm not competitive. But then you see them like in a race and or when they finish a race and they'll be like, yeah, you know, I had to pass that woman, or I had to pass that guy at the end before the finish line, and they'll sprint for it. So like, I think everybody, you know, there seems to be this this idea that to be competitive is like not a good thing, especially I think for women. We always want to be like, oh no, I'm not competitive, you know, like I'm not threatening kind of, but you know, I think everyone's a bit competitive when it comes to racing. So it's good to have like a place to where it's okay to do that. And I think running is one of those places, and participating in races is a good place to
Except
do
if you
that
try
kind
to
of thing.
beat me in the training sessions, Liz. That's
I
really
don't-
not
I don't-
on. Don't try to beat me. Okay. I'm very fragile.
I know you will never let me beat you in the training. That is for sure. Sometimes if I come up on Alan at the end of the, you know, like we're doing 400s, oh my gosh, he accelerates. It's really funny. You can't try and beat Alan in the training.
I love it.
One day. This book's about marathons. So marathons are not the first thing usually you get into, or in your case, they probably are almost, because you're doing 50K trail runs. But so when do you think someone is ready to run their first marathon?
Don't do it the way I did. Don't do it like my story.
Yeah.
I think that by and large, adults, so I guess to clarify, I normally speak to, and my book is written for kind of adult runners, 30s and 40s, 50s, who are getting into running at that stage of life and becoming a competitive athlete, either for the first time, or maybe like you, Liz, you ran in high school, took some time off, and then are getting back into it. By and large, I think most adults go to the half marathon and the marathon too soon. I think that the best way to develop as a runner, if your goal is to become faster, become stronger, have a longer career, stay healthy, and enjoy all that running has to offer, is to slowly move up the distances from, you know, the shortest distances available. Let's just say 5K for most adults, 5K, 10K, half, marathon. But that doesn't mean do a 5K and then right after that do a 10K, and then right after that do a half, and then a marathon all in 1 year.
You don't mean all like in the same season.
Consecutive weekends.
Take some time to master the 5K. Maybe that's 6 months. Maybe it's a year. Then take 6 months moving up, 10K, half marathon. And what I like to tell folks, and the middle section of my book is called The 6 Phases of Marathon Training. I talk about in that section how when you're marathon training, you're trying to develop 2 different skills at the same time. And this is, I think, almost impossible to do, but we do our best. You're trying to get faster at the same time you're trying to build your endurance. And I think that those 2 skills in many ways are mutually exclusive. Therefore, the faster you can get as an athlete before you then transition to the marathon, ultimately the faster you'll be in the marathon. You know, if you can run a fast 5K and a fast half marathon, then obviously you can run a fast full marathon. But if you kind of have, you know, if you admit you sort of are slow at the 5K, slow at the 10, slow at the half, you're going to be slow at the marathon. And the marathon is going to be that much harder, and you'll be that much less prepared for it. So I think everyone can run a marathon, and I love the marathon, but you want to develop as an athlete first. And then once you feel like you're a competent athlete ready to take on the challenge of the marathon, then you go to do that event.
That actually makes a lot of sense, because for a few years I was running on the university cross country team, and so I was focused on 5K because that was the ladies' distance. And I had run a personal best during that time just by doing 5K training. And then I was doing like long runs on the weekend. And that was basically like the long runs. And they were long, easy runs. There was no marathon pace. There was no tempo. There was nothing in there. but I ran a personal best that it ended up taking me 5 or 6 years to beat that, even though I was doing marathon training while I was trying to get faster. So yeah, it's interesting that way. So like I can totally see that getting faster will help you run a faster marathon as well.
Yeah. And too many folks, in my experience, they go to the half marathon and the marathon because those are the glory events for amateur runners. I mean, I disagree with that perspective, but it's unfortunately the reality, at least here where I live in the US. You know, the world marathon majors, I live right near Boston. I lived in Boston most of my life. I think it's the best marathon in the world, and rightfully so. It's amazing. I'm going to be doing Chicago this fall, another great one. New York, right? London, Berlin. These are huge destination events. Everyone wants to do these, but there's very few 5, 10, or halves that are any. I can't even think of one that has the appeal of one of these world marathon majors. So people want to go right to these glory events. Problem is, once you start running marathons, it's kind of hard to convince that athlete, like, hey, why don't you take a step back? Why don't you not do a marathon for a year or so? And let's just try to get you as fast as we can so that when you go back to do your next marathon, you'll be so much faster because of it.
Yeah, I think there's an aspect of ticking the box with marathons. People talk about being one and done. You know, I want to do a marathon, I tick the box. Now when it comes up, when those boring marathon runners bring the conversation up yet again about their marathon, I can say I did one of those. And it just becomes like sort of a bucket list or a box tick event, and people maybe underestimate what's required often.
Yeah. I think it's the hardest event, harder than ultra marathons, harder than shorter distance road races, maybe harder than track. I mean, it's the most unpredictable, and I think it's the perfect storm of challenges that an athlete faces. It's not only extremely long, and most people struggle with the distance, it's also very fast. And if you're trying to run it anywhere close to your potential, those two things, you know, how fast you need to go combined with how long it is, makes for a very unpredictable event.
Yeah, I guess as I described in my story at the start, your brain will tell you that you're trying to kill yourself and attempt to switch your legs off.
Yeah, and so kind of like along the same lines, is there any difference between the kind of workouts that you would give like a first-time marathoner versus a marathoner that like maybe it's not their first time, or they have bigger goals, like they want to qualify for Boston or run a sub 3-hour marathon maybe?
Definitely. One thing that I like to encourage folks to do is every training cycle you go through, you want to add in one element to your run training that you weren't doing before. So that could be a lot of things. And I touch on a lot of them in this book. But you asked about workouts, right? First time marathoners. Well, first of all, there's the conversation of, you know, where are you at with your mileage, and is running 26 going to be the main challenge for you, or is the speed of the speed of covering that distance going to be the main challenge for you? Those are two different athletes. So a new runner, someone who maybe the distance is the primary challenge for them, the main workout's going to be the long run. And one of the things I talk about in Run Fast Marathons is not overemphasizing the long run. I think most new marathoners just say, like, you know, every week I'm going to increase the distance of the long run until I get to 20, or maybe that's 35K, something like that. And then I'm going to be prepared and I'll be able to run this race. But every run you do has a purpose. It's not just the long run that creates the total package of a marathoner, but it's the recovery runs you do, the easy runs you do, the workouts you do. But for the new runner, yeah, it's going to be the long run. It is the main one. I'd say maybe slightly more intermediate runner, then they can maybe do 2 workouts per week. So they're going to have their long run, and they're going to have maybe one midweek speed workout. And in the second section of my book, The 6 Phases of Marathon Training, I talk about how as you get closer and closer to your marathon, the types of workouts you're going to want to do are going to evolve over time. And I tried to write this book so that if you wanted to, you could actually develop your own training. My book has no training plans in it. It's all just theory. But I wanted to give the reader an insight into kind of the mind of a coach. Like, how do you develop a workout? How do you know how long it should be? Why should you do different types at different times in your trainings cycle? whether you're far away from the race or closer to it. So yeah, that intermediate runner, maybe one workout per week plus the long run. And maybe the long run for them, if they wanted to, they could start to include some faster running in their long run as well. Maybe it's not just an easy run at that point. Depends how competitive they are and what their goals are.
Mhm.
And then a more advanced runner, then you're starting to get into maybe 2 different styles of workout midweek, maybe a workout on Tuesday and a Thursday, and then your long run on the weekend. That would be one thing, right? So it might take you 3 training cycles or a year and a half to get to that point where you're doing 2 workouts in a long run. Maybe you start and it's just all comfortable runs. Second marathon, maybe you add 1 workout per week. Third marathon, maybe you add 2 workouts per week. Or, and there's a good argument for this, maybe it's something else that you add into your run rather than just you're running and rather than just more intensity. Some of the things I get into here are how you go from being someone who just runs to being a well-rounded athlete who's incorporating kind of all different aspects of strength and mobility and warm up and mental training into their total training package. So maybe it's just, being more regular and intentional with your strength training and doing that. More than half the runners out there probably do no strength training, but it can be very helpful. Maybe it's learning how to do a proper dynamic warm-up with drills and adding strides into your warm-up routine, that kind of thing. Very few amateur runners do anything like that. But, you add these things in gradually.
For the strength training part, because this is always a question, let's say for somebody that hasn't really been doing any strength training, how would you start them off? And then also, would you have them do the strength training on the hard days or on the easy days? Because there's one theory that if you try and keep your hard days hard and your easy days easy, but then also sometimes the strength training can take away from your hard workouts because you're tired from the strength training.
Yeah, I think most people overcomplicate strength training. The reason why I say this is because most people just don't do it. I mean, I think that is the case. People are so overwhelmed by the concept of it, or they just don't want to do it because they don't think it's fun, that they just do nothing at all, or they do something very half-heartedly. The nice thing about strength training for distance runners is a little goes a long way. And, we're not training for sprint and power events. We're not trying to run the world's fastest 100 meters or throw a shot put, 200 feet. We're just trying to maintain a healthy body that's going to be resilient to injury, that's going to be able to run as fast as possible. And thankfully, the best thing we can do as runners is just run more, run consistently, and stay healthy. That's really it. So the purpose of strength training is to make sure that your body can run more and handle the stress that you're giving it, so you stay healthy. So running alone, a lot of people can get away with just running alone, but you're going to be a much more resilient runner long-term if you incorporate some strength training as well. So there's some simple routines in the book. For most runners, just body weight exercises are fine. If you want to make them a little more challenging, you can use some resistance bands on some of them, like some of the hip mobility and strengthening exercises I have in this book. You could start with just body weight, then maybe add a resistance band if it becomes too easy, that kind of thing. But just simple exercises, push-ups, planks, glute bridges. There's a routine here called the 7-way hip, where you just lay on the ground and you raise your leg in a bunch of different ways. These things help a ton. And when to do them, it's better to do strength than to not do it. So in an ideal world, I would say 2 or 3 slightly longer strength sessions per week. Do them right when you finish your harder sessions. So let's say you do a harder session on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. You come home and you spend 10 minutes doing your strength routine. It can literally be the same strength routine every time. It doesn't need to be that complicated. If time is a factor, you could do it on your easy days. It doesn't really matter, but it's important to do something. And the biggest problem I see runners make is they just don't do any strength. And then they maybe develop a muscular imbalance when they're increasing their mileage or intensity, and it finally catches up with some muscular weakness that they have. Or in the marathon, maybe it's fatiguing at the end of a race, once your body has been beaten down by the miles and the hills, and maybe doing a little bit of muscular strengthening beforehand could have made the difference.
Or your form fails you at the end because you haven't got the strength to keep your form, and then that tires you more. And
Mhm.
so it becomes a vicious circle.
Mhm.
One of the things about strength training, I think, is that runners want to run, so they don't want to do these weird exercises.
Mhm.
So what I would say out there to Liz is laughing because I said weird exercises. What I would sort of say out there to everybody is join a club so other people are doing these weird things as well, and then you don't feel so weird. Or have an accountability buddy. I mean, I do my strength at the moment with Liz's husband, and we keep each other accountable for going to the gym and doing workouts. And we don't do the workouts that the gym does because they're doing be strong CrossFit guys or whatever. We do the workouts that we've designed, say exercises out of your book, for example, and we run through those together, and we'll go, oh, yeah, that's good. Oh, we're a bit short on glute activation, and we'll add some stuff in for that. And I would say more than 50% of the trick is working out how to make yourself consistently do a little bit. And that's the problem with going home and do it when you get home, because it's better to come to our training program and with the club, and then everybody's standing around their cars waiting to get ready to go, and then everybody sees Liz doing her funny standing lunges in different directions. And to begin with, everybody looked at her and went, "Oh, she's weird." And now, about 8 weeks later, everybody's kind of joining in. Everybody does them, so everybody's doing these exercises while we're talking, waiting for everybody to gather up. And it's little, but it's, you dose it in a small amount at a time. So that's cool. Work out how to force yourself to be consistent, I think.
To follow up on that, so as a high school coach, I am with a group of 10 distance runners every day, and I make them go through these routines. We go through a pre-run warm-up with a bunch of funny lunges, and after the run, we do a group strength session circuit, like similar to what I have in my book here.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to do when you're with a group, because they're chatting, they're laughing, they're joking about their form. If one of them falls or whatever, they all laugh about it. Sometimes as adult runners, we're kind of like lone wolves out there. A lot of us run solo. I love to run solo. I almost do all my runs by myself, but there's so much benefit to joining up with a team as an adult. Whether that's a running club, like you were saying, Alan, in person, whether it's finding an online club or joining a team or working with a coach or having an accountability buddy or a friend or something like that. The power of teamwork and bringing that to your running as an adult is so powerful.
Sure is. Let me switch it up a little bit and talk about warm-ups, because you mentioned warm-ups as part of the extra stuff that we need to pay attention to as we get better. I noticed something that was quite unusual in your book, because you said when doing a warm-up routine, you're doing this to some extent for self-confidence.
Yeah.
I thought you were doing it to get warm, but probably you're doing that as well. Is this because sort of the ritual nature of it, the ritualistic sort of nature of the warm-up? If it's the same routine, it sort of zones you in some way, and that's equally as important as whatever the exercise is.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. So people often ask me what exercises they should include in their warm-up routine. And I have standard routines that I teach folks, but I'm not going to tell you it's the best warm-up routine. The best warm-up routine is the one that makes you as an individual feel ready physically and mentally to run your best workout and run your best race. There's a lot of physical benefits to doing good warm-ups. They're going to activate, all your muscles before you start running really fast. It's going to help ease into running. Everyone knows that experience of starting a run and you kind of feel like crap for the first mile or two. Eventually you feel good. Going through a warm-up routine and just moving your body through all these different motions helps eliminate that. Ideally you would start a workout or start a race and you just feel good from the very beginning. You don't need to go through this period of it feeling like crap. So that's one reason why you do the warm-up physically. I think many of my best races and best workouts, I felt really bad during the warm-up, but since I've given myself so much time to warm up, maybe it's a 15, 20-minute run, 5 or 10 minutes of stretching and drills and strides, gives my body a chance to move through that not feeling so good state that I'm in, then I feel great. But so much of running to your potential is confidence. You can only run as fast as you're physically capable of, but your mental state and your confidence level when you approach that run is going to determine how close to your physical potential you actually push yourself. And this is an equally important part of why runners should do a good warm-up before a workout and a race. It is that ritual that you're doing. You want to, coaches often say, control what you can control. Running is super simple. You do the training, you show up, and you do your best. And it's very predictable most of the time. If you think you can run a certain time and you do everything right that you can control, you're going to do it. It's when you get in your head or you don't do the things that make you feel your best beforehand, whether that's skipping your warm up, not eating before your run, not hydrating, doubting yourself, these kind of things. These are when you don't run to your true potential. And I've seen a lot of athletes, unfortunately, who often don't race to their potential because of confidence issues. So the beginning of a race, beginning of a workout, developing a warm-up routine of stretches, drills, strides that makes you feel confident. And you can go through every time before you begin that hard activity, that thing you're about to do that's going to push yourself and challenge yourself. It's just a grounding opportunity mentally. You take some time to yourself, you check in with your body, how you're feeling. If anything feels off, you recognize it before you get into the workout. You think about what you have to do up ahead. You kind of visualize the workout or visualize the race as you're doing the stretches. I think it's really important, physically and mentally.
What about masters athletes? So, because I think the athlete that you were talking about at the beginning, the one that didn't do maybe track in high school but got into running later, oftentimes they're sort of like, oh no, I'm not competitive, I don't need to do a proper warm-up. What would you say to them? And also, is there anything that you would do different in terms of their training?
Yeah. So anytime anyone tells me they don't want to warm up, I say, look around. All of the best runners here are doing a warm up. We should be emulating what we see the best runners doing, no matter your age. If your goal is to be better, you need to model people who clearly have it figured out. And all the best athletes before a race are warming up. The people who are not are usually not going to be finishing in the top couple places, right?
Yeah. If I could just chip in just in the middle of your response, in terms of confidence for warm up, Liz and I, we did a pretty decent 10K race last year as part of our marathon prep. And we did a warm up together, and it was absolutely brilliant in terms of the warm up. It's Liz's standard warm up, but for me, it was kind of more than I usually do. We had a great race, and I had a 5K a few weeks later, and Liz was just kind of there to spectate. So I said to Liz, put me through the warm-up. I don't have the mental capacity to kind of put myself through the warm-up because I'm lazy with the warm-up. I tend to underplay the warm-up. Put me through the warm-up. And I was sort of confident that, one, I wasn't going to have to do any thinking about it. I just do what Coach Liz tells me. And two, I was going to get the A1 warm-up that we did a great race off the back of. So I was visualizing and super confident that I was going to be ready to race. So I had that confidence level as well as the preparation. So just an example, if people think, yeah, we hear what you're saying. No, we actually lived that experience.
I love it. To elaborate on this, and I want to get to your question, Liz, about masters athletes as well. But first, just another reason why the warm-up is so important. The fourth chapter in my book is called How to Improve Your Running Form Naturally. And I get so many questions about running form, and should I change my running form, and do I have good running form, and all this stuff. And a lot of people don't seem to know. It's kind of gray area, right? There's so many amazing athletes who you look at them and they have what looks like terrible running form, but they're still great athletes and they seems to work for them. Likewise, you see people with beautiful running form and, maybe they're not as good as someone with much worse. But there's ways that you can improve your running form naturally. And I get into this. One of them is by doing a proper warm-up. So the reasons why you want to have good running form is because you as an individual, as you develop the best running form for yourself, which is going to look different than somebody else, You're going to run more efficiently. You're going to reduce your chances of getting hurt, and you'll enjoy running more. You'll perform better as a result. Everyone wants that. The ways that you improve your running form are by incorporating different elements into your training that promote the use of running with good form. You're not just going to will yourself to running with good form. You need to teach it through muscle memory. I love ultramarathoners, but often ultramarathoners have some of the worst running form because they're just doing not all of them. Many of them are just doing lots of very slow, slogging running, low leg lift, shuffling. It's called the ultra shuffle. Whereas you look at track athletes, they often have the best running form because they're running faster. Events like the marathon are a blend between running fast and endurance. But you need good form if you want to run a fast marathon. So you need to be doing things like regular speed work that are going to teach your body to run fast. When you run fast, you have good form. You need to be doing things like strides, which you're going to be practicing short bursts of faster running, maybe every other day or so, much faster than any pace you probably race. That's going to teach you to run with good running form. Many of the drills that you do as part of a good warm-up encourage you to run with good running form as well. Many of the drills also in their own right are, strengthening exercises and mobility exercises. Things like running with high knees or karaoke or side shuffles. You're putting your body through different types of movements that you don't normally experience as a runner, but they're making you move in different ways. And if you do them fast or powerfully, you're strengthening your body in ways that's going to help you run with better form and be more efficient. Another thing is incorporating hill running, especially uphill running, into your training. So the warm-up is just one component that for all athletes is going to teach them to run with better form. But it's also going to get you physically and mentally prepared before your workout to run your best, to run with your best form. So whether you're a brand new runner, I see this in high school. Freshmen come in, they have never trained before. They don't have an athletic body. They need to do stuff like this just to develop some base athleticism and have the strength to carry their body strongly and run with good form. New kids often come in looking like deers running. It's baby deers. It's funny. Yeah. And older athletes, maybe master athletes, doing this kind of stuff is going to help offset some of the degenerative effects of aging. So I think every athlete should do it. I don't think it really matters whether you're young or old. When it comes to actual training and how you structure your racing calendar year as a master's athlete versus a younger athlete, I think there's maybe some differences you might want to consider. We could get into if you want or not. But when it comes to things like the warm-up, everyone should be doing it.
I noticed as well in your book that you talk about thinking about maybe doing some of your dynamic warm-ups. That's sort of the movement drills in bare feet. Is that sort of targeted to people? Say if you run in bare feet, you have a much more natural good form.
Yes.
Because you don't have a pair of shoes helping you along. You have to go with what you're feeling underneath your feet, and you instinctively revert to a more natural, good form.
Totally.
Is that the idea behind that?
Totally. It is. So where do we begin with this? Prior to the invention of carbon-plated super shoes, things like the Nike Vaporfly, runners often ran in very minimalist racing flats. This is what people would race in. They were essentially, it was as close to running barefoot as you could, maybe just a very thin rubber sole. And this was light, so it was faster, and it would encourage you to run with more natural form. For those listening who run on the track, the experience of running with a track spike. Many of the modern track spikes now have gone the way of the road marathon shoes with big cushioning and that kind of thing. But traditionally, a distance spike would be very minimal as well. And it would essentially be like running barefoot. I'm not saying go buy a pair of Vibrams and start doing all your running in barefoot shoes, but there's a lot of benefits to incorporating some minimalist footwear like track spikes or old school flats, if you can still find them, or even barefoot running or exercises barefoot. Incorporate that a little bit into your training. There's so many benefits to it. Not only is doing it in small amounts going to help encourage you to move the way your body's meant to and improve your running form, when you're barefoot, you have to run gently, right? Like you have to run in the way that's most comfortable. You can't run barefoot too much, and you can't wear things like track spikes or flats too much because there's not a lot of cushioning, there's not a lot of support. But when you actually are running with them, you're running more efficiently. Most people being barefoot and running in minimalist footwear is also going to help strengthen your feet, your ankles, and your lower legs when used in moderation. So as runners, we're always looking for ways to stay consistent and reduce our risk of getting injured. And being barefoot in some of your exercises you do, your strength exercises, very short bits of running or occasional workouts and track spikes or flats, it's going to stress your body in different ways, stretch your feet, lower legs in different ways, and you will be stronger because of it. A couple of other tips along the same line that I think most runners would benefit from. So one, on this barefoot topic, I really think runners should, when you're at home and maybe even at work, if you're allowed to, you should be barefoot or just in socks or slippers with no sole. The more you can be barefoot, the better. It's going to strengthen your feet, and you're just going to be less likely to get injured if you do that. The other thing is making sure that you run on soft surfaces as much as you can. Even if you're a road runner, by seeking out soft surfaces on your run, it's going to have a lot of the same effects that running barefoot or walking barefoot has. It's going to make you utilize your feet and your ankles and your lower legs in slightly different ways because of the irregularity and instability of softer surfaces. I'm talking trails, dirt roads, grass, that kind of thing. It's going to strengthen you.
Did you hear that, Liz? Chris is
Yeah, I
talking
heard
trails,
that.
dirt roads, grass
know.
and stuff.
Hmm.
Did you
And
hear it?
stuff. Yeah, I think I might have heard a few words of that. I
One
really
of-
like road running.
So I live in a city. There's very few trails here, but there are a few. And I love trail running. I don't do enough of it. And I think most road runners who are in urban areas, or I mean, even anywhere really, don't have a lot of great access to trails. But think about the ones you do have.
I think it's very segregated. I think like the runners that like running on the road, they will just always want to run on the road. And then the trail runners, they will do everything to seek out the trails.
Yeah. If you have some parks near you that you can run to and connect those parks, maybe you have, maybe in an 8-mile run, you can connect 4 or 5 different parks, and you just run along the perimeter of the park on the grass, or if there's a small little gravel path, and you loop them up in one big loop around your town or city. If you do that, maybe there's a soccer field in there too, or a small woods trail. If you do that, you might get 2, 3, I mean, maybe even more of those miles on softer surfaces. So some of my favorite running routes are ones where, I run 2 miles on pavement to a trail network, do a little 2 or 3 mile loop there, and then come back. And if I do that, say 2 or 3 days a week, at least I'm getting, I don't know, a quarter of my mileage on softer surfaces. But the more, the better, even for road runners.
We did a podcast. I think it was the Ethiopian runners and the Kenyans, I think, where they do nearly all their training off the asphalt, and then they turn up and they run 2:05 for a marathon. They do very little of their training actually on the hard surface. So
yeah,
it bears that out.
Mm-hmm.
One benefit of running on softer surfaces is it will allow you to run more if you choose to. I firmly believe that it's easier on our bodies to run on softer surfaces. So you'll be less sore the next day. You can run more mileage. You can run more time. I even think of this when I'm running in my urban environment here. There's certain routes I go on where the sidewalks are concrete, and there's other ones where I go on where I can safely run on the street, which is asphalt, or the sidewalks are asphalt. And I know that the asphalt is much softer than the concrete sidewalks. Yeah. So I try to avoid these long routes of all concrete. I hate running on concrete if I can avoid it.
Yeah, my husband says the same thing. He'll like hop off the sidewalk, and I'll be like, your life is in danger because you're gonna get run over. And he's like, no, I'll just hop on the sidewalk when
it's worth it. It's worth it.
So maybe we could talk a little bit more about planning. because
Yeah.
most of us will plan like our next training cycle or our next race season. Like if you're doing 5K, for sure you're doing more than one race.
Mhm.
But in your book you talk about like planning bigger picture, so like planning our whole career. I mean, I guess that career might be for the pro runners, but you probably have like something similar for all the recreational runners. Is there like why would we want to plan sort of the bigger picture?
Because if you want to continue to progress, you're going to need to layer in additional elements to your training over time. And that can take years. So, this could be as simple as how much mileage are you doing, right? Like it's someone who's a brand new runner, depends who they are, but maybe they start running 20 miles a week. And I would say if 20 seems like a lot for you, then complete that training cycle. And then the next training cycle, you can do 30, maybe add 10 miles. I just kind of make that number up, but it seems to work. If that goes well, maybe the next training cycle, 40. If that goes well, 50. And when I'm talking about training cycles here, I'm talking about 4 to 6 months periods of time. So it may take, if you want to be conservative with it, 2 or 3 years to go from someone who's running 20 miles a week to, let's say, 50 or 60 or something like that. Ever since I became a high school coach, I learned so much from the experience of teaching high school kids. A rough rule of thumb that I think about with my high school girls and how this applies to adults is, say I have a girl who loves running and really wants to be all in on it and be their best when they're a senior. I'll say, all right, as a freshman, let's try to get you running 25 miles a week. As a sophomore, 30. Junior, 35. Senior, 40. So we're increasing it 5 miles per year. That's very slow. But for a high school girl running 40 miles a week, certainly there's more people who do more than that, but that's pretty good. For adult runners, if you can add 10 miles to your training, most people are too impatient to add 5 miles per year, but 10 miles every 6 months or so, you're going to get better as you go. Beyond just mileage, though, think about what races are you going to do at these different stages of your running. Again, everyone wants to do a marathon, but the longer you wait to do a marathon, I think the better you'll be once you actually get there. So I work with a lot of athletes who are new runners, and they embrace this concept and they say, hey, I want to do a marathon someday, but let's do it 2 years from now. Once I've kind of built a really strong base, become a really competent athlete at 5K, 10K, half, maybe do a year just of those events. Maybe they don't even do their first half marathon their first year of running. And then when they feel ready in year 2 or 3, maybe they go to the marathon. And then, a lot of people I support and speak to, they have big dreams of, maybe doing all the world marathon majors, qualifying for the Boston Marathon, qualifying for New York, London, Tokyo, all these things. These are pinnacle achievements for amateur runners. And, yeah, some people achieve something like a BQ early in their career. You're just talented enough to do that. But other people take some 5 or 10 years of hard work and progress to get to that. And, no matter what your goal is, what you're trying to achieve, you need to be patient with how you map that out, because what's great about distance running is no matter when you begin this sport, whether you're a 15-year-old kid or, a 45-year-old woman, or heck, I coach some people in their 50s who hardly have run before. They're seeing tremendous progress. It's just when you start, from the day you start running and taking it seriously, you maybe have 10 years of improvement if you keep working at it. So where do you want to be each of those years? And what are your dreams, 10 years from now? If you can't even imagine that, that's too hard to imagine, but you don't even know where you'll be. But you can try to make a roadmap to it.
And is there something like a common item that a lot of runners get wrong, a mistake they're making? And this might be different for adults and for high school runners, but is there something that you've noticed?
The most common thing is just thinking that the way to get faster is to just run faster all the time, or whenever you feel like it. I mean, that's what I think every uneducated person on how run training works thinks. It's the most common correction I need to make with athletes when I first start working with them. It's just, I take a look at someone's runs and it's like, there's there's hardly any difference between the pace they do on an everyday run and then the pace maybe they run a 10K or a half marathon at. It's just all kind of the same. It all blurs together. And then when I ask them like, hey, you go out and do that run, like, how'd it feel? They're like, yeah, it felt like a pretty good workout, kind of moderate, hard, like got a good run in. But there's a lot of reasons why that doesn't work. What always seems to make people better athletes is when they change that framework of just doing the same kind of moderate hard run all the time to really getting on a structured plan that has a purpose for every run and variety in what you're doing. Most people who are in this world have heard of the 80-20 philosophy. That works great. If you run 6 days a week, 2 or 3 of those days are kind of hard. The other days are really, really easy. And the more advanced of a runner you become, the more mileage you do, the more stress you're starting to put on your body, the more important it becomes to really embrace this mentality. When I first start coaching new runners and I tell them, I actually just started coaching a guy. He would do all his runs in like the 8-minute per mile range. And I was like, you need to slow down to like 9 to 10. That's a lot. He's like, oh, it feels so slow. And I told him, yeah, it will for a few weeks. But once I have you start doing like some actual fast, hard workouts, you're going to be thankful that you get to go slow in between.
Mm-hmm.
And you're really going to start to see improvement when you bring that variety into your training.
Yeah, if people are having difficulty slowing themselves down, then we inject a small, tiny amount of hard, fast pace, and then maybe they'll find it easier. I get the impression that with motivated athletes and athletes who are keen on kind of what they're doing, the aspect that you're sort of preaching all the time, and we see it ourselves, is patience, being patient. But what about people who are not motivated? So I don't know whether you come across those so much, but
Mm-hmm.
how do we motivate our athletes who, work's too difficult and my last 3 runs didn't work out so good and I don't feel up to it. You got any tips?
It's a hard question. I mean, when I first started coaching, I thought, I'd become this great motivator. I'd figure that out. And someone was telling me those excuses. I'd just be able to say something and whip their attitude.
Flick a switch.
What I've kind of come to now, maybe others would disagree, but I really think that my role as a coach is I help the student when they're ready to learn. And if you're someone who makes all these excuses for why you're not doing what you think you should be doing, that I just think that that's just something you need to get over. I mean, you got to get over it. You're either going to be a runner or you're not. Like, if you're not doing the workouts that are on your training plan or you're making up these excuses, you're never going to accomplish the goals that you've set for yourself. So are those goals that maybe they're just not meaningful enough to you, or maybe there's some reason why you're not doing it, but you have to get over that. You have to show up and want to do the work. Running is super fun if you have the right mindset for it. There's a million excuses that you can make. I've had people tell me, oh, I can't train because I have kids, or I got to work long hours, or, I can't afford to enter the races or buy the gear or pay for coaching or whatever. But it's like, okay, sure. But, I coach people with 3 kids who are 50, who are work crazy hours, and they figure out how to make it work. So, there's always someone who's making it work. And I think that if the reason why you're not doing what you think you can be doing is because of some situational thing, that's just a mindset. You can figure it out if you want to enough. Sometimes doing doing the thing that's easy is not necessarily doing the thing that's right. And sometimes if you want it badly enough, you just need to do the thing that's right, if it's hard at first, until it becomes easy. One thing that I just thought of, I was reading a book this morning, and it's actually it's called The Miracle Morning. Have you read that?
No.
By Hal
Not yet.
Elrod. It's about morning routines. It's a great book about how to establish how to spend the first hour of your day setting your day up for success. And it includes, 10 minutes of meditation, 10 minutes of reading affirmative statements about the person you want to become, 10 minutes about visualizing your day, 10 minutes of reading, 10 minutes of writing. and then exercise. And I've been loving it. I've been doing it. I became an early riser actually about a month ago because I started doing this program, and I'm loving it. I know I'm being a little long-winded, but I read a chapter in that book today, and he talks about he calls it the three U's of habit change. The first U, so he says habits take 30 days to establish, no matter what it is. The first 10 days are unbearable. Say you want to become a runner, but you make all these excuses, you always blow it off. If you're going to become a runner, the first 10 days are going to be unbearable. You're going to hate it. You're not going to want to do it, but you just have to get through those 10 days. Then the second 10 days, day 10 to day 20, they go from unbearable to uncomfortable, starting to get a little bit easier, but it's still kind of like, this is terrible. I don't like this. I want to stay in bed. I'm sore. This isn't fun. The final 10 days, days 20 to day 30, is when the third U, when you become unstoppable. Then you really start to love it. And I think all runners who have been through the first month of run training know what this experience is like. Becoming a runner, a serious runner, someone who identifies as one, the first 30 days are really the hardest. But then you love it. Then you are unstoppable. And running will become maybe your favorite part of the day, the one thing that you can't deal with missing. You just have to do it. And you feel terrible when you don't get it in. So I love that analogy of 30 days. First it's unbearable, then it's uncomfortable, then you become unstoppable. But you have to go through that hardship to get to the point where it's so rewarding and so joyous.
I think that's why there are so many stories of like people that started running because they wanted to lose weight. They were just doing it because they wanted to lose weight, but then they end up loving the activity because they did it long enough.
Totally.
And I think the thing is also to embrace the fact that there's no easy way around. You have to go through. You can go through on your terms at your speed, but you have to go through. So you can't go, well, I'll skip the unbearable bit. I'll start at day 11.
It doesn't really work that way.
And when we hear about good athletes being ultra realists, so they assess what's possible, what's deliverable, what can be done with what they've got, and then they get on and deliver it. They don't make excuses.
Yeah. Whether you're becoming a better athlete, growing a business, trying to improve in your relationships, any of these things, you have to put in the work. You can't just expect that you're going to improve and blow off the necessary steps to get where you want to go. It's like that with running. If you want to be a better runner, look at what the best runners around you are doing, find some role models, get a good plan, and then you got to get the work in, and you'll learn to love it eventually. But don't make excuses.
So this might be a little bit, it's a little off topic, but it's not, because in your bio, you're vegan since 2008. And I know, like, Alan and I are not vegans, but we might have listeners that are. And I was kind of just wondering because, when you're vegan, you do have a restriction in what you can eat. And so do you find it difficult to fuel your running? Because, when you're marathon training, you need a lot of fuel, and that's already difficult. Like, it's difficult for me, and I'm not a vegan, so I can eat whatever I want. Do you have any maybe tricks to help you stay fueled? And also, do you have any strategies for dealing with, like the common deficiencies that sometimes vegans have, like iron, let's say?
So I became vegan when I was about 18 or 19 years old. So it's pretty much all I've known my entire adult life. So coming at it with that bias. But I'm it's one of the most important things to my identity. To me, it's I feel like it's the healthiest way I can eat. I have ethical beliefs about it that are important to me. It's really, it's a core part of my identity. I think as an athlete, there's a lot of benefits to it. So, everyone says eat more fruits and vegetables. They're good for you. They help you recover better. They help you grow strong. So I eat a lot of those. Maybe there's some challenges too, just like any diet. There's going to be some things that are good, some things that maybe aren't as good. I also have a very fast metabolism, so I need to eat quite a bit. One of the nice things about being a runner is you need to fuel a lot to keep up with all of the calories that you're burning and to grow stronger after your hard workout. So, I love that. I mean, I'm a very thin guy. I've always been a thin guy my whole life, but I have a bottomless appetite. I feel like I can eat. My wife doesn't like it because I eat everything in the house, but I love it. I mean, it's fun. I love to cook. I love to eat as much as I want. Plant-based foods. So I don't eat dairy. I don't eat meat, tend to be lower calories, but they're higher vitamins and minerals. They're higher in nutrition typically per, amount that you're getting versus something like meat and dairy, which have a place in a healthy diet, but maybe aren't as, there's a lot of reasons why meat and dairy might or may not be healthy, depending on how you're eating it and when you're eating it. But as runners, our primary fuel sources are carbohydrates. So got to eat a lot of carbs. I do that. I think as runners, the main vitamins and minerals that you want to pay attention to are calcium, vitamin D, and iron. And you asked about iron. Calcium is going to help make sure that we have strong bones and are less susceptible to things like stress reactions or fractures. Vitamin D is very much the same way, helps with strong bones. And iron helps with our body's ability to transport oxygen to our muscles to fuel our running. So, as a vegan diet, you can meet all those requirements, and I think do so in a very healthy way. You can probably do it on just about any diet, but no matter how you eat, you want to pay attention to those things. So not a doctor, but I would strongly recommend most folks supplement with vitamin D. I think our bodies get that primarily from sunlight. Most of us don't spend enough time in the sun, and then there's some concerns with spending too much time in the sun. So,
and then also we wear sunscreen, so your skin is not
and some of us live in
really.
Canada where there isn't any sun for half the year.
Yeah, well, there's that too.
So supplementing with vitamin D, I mean, again, not a doctor, but I think that just about anyone would benefit from that. I do it personally. Paying attention to calcium, I think that's an important mineral as athletes who we're pounding on our bodies all the time. So do try to include sources of that into my diet. I don't eat dairy, but there's plenty of vegan sources of calcium. Many different types of nuts, like almonds, have them. I do drink plant milks with some regularity. Those usually have calcium in them as well. Tofu has calcium. I think certain types of leafy greens have calcium. I'm not too worried about it, but I try to include those things into my diet. Iron is another thing. Runners need to pay a lot of attention to iron. I've worked with athletes who have been deficient in iron. My wife has been deficient in iron. I've been borderline deficient with iron. I've also had athletes deficient in vitamin D. But iron is something you want to pay attention to. There's a number of reasons why runners may need more iron than the average person. Don't claim to be an expert on the science, but my understanding is that the actual act of running breaks down some of the iron that our body is producing, some of the red blood cells, which in turn means, because of all the mileage we're doing, we're depleting iron as a waste product, or we're depleting iron by running, and therefore need to replenish it more. And the higher our iron stores are, the easier it's going to be to run. If anyone has ever dealt with low iron, they know, you're just so much drastically slower than when you were normal. So good sources of iron. If you eat meat, many types of meat, if you're primarily eating plant-based foods like I do, beans, whole grains, there's other ones. I have an article on my blog about this, but can't think of it right now.
It sounds like you got it pretty dialed in though, in terms of you got plenty of the foods and you eat,
Yeah.
I always say eat all the food. You seem to eat all the food, albeit vegan, but
yeah, eat all the food, try to get a variety of it, and try to eat healthy things. I really think that runners benefit from eating as clean of a diet as possible, especially if your goal is a lifetime of health and longevity. Just trying to eat as healthy as possible, and that can take the form of many different ways of eating. And I'm not going to say any is right or wrong or best for an individual, but I think most folks would agree that the more whole food, unprocessed types of foods you're incorporating into your diet, the better.
Yeah.
Real foods.
Real food. Yep.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think anybody will tell you that for sure. To have to have real food is
Scott
much
Jurek's
better.
a vegan, and he's run a lot of miles in his time without too much
Mm.
trouble.
He was a big inspiration to me, actually. When I was first getting into trail running, Scott Jurek was someone who I looked up to, just actually because he was so outspoken about being vegan. And, you know, I saw him and said, hey, this guy's doing it. So
he also ran the
I'll try it too.
Appalachian Trail. He had the record at one time, 41 days, I think. We covered his book North in one of our episodes. Just switching up the subject a bit and being conscious of time a little bit. You mentioned your website and articles in your blog. We saw on your website that you were talking at one stage about giving away copies of this book in ebook version. Is that offer still on?
It is for a limited time. I think I may retire it at some point in the middle of 2023.
Okay.
But if you're listening to this and you go to knightonruns.com, there's a pop-up there or a form at the bottom of the page where you can just put in your name and email, sign up for my newsletter, and I'll send you a free PDF copy of the book. I want to give it away because I do want to get this into the hands of as many people as possible. I will say, though, that vast majority of people who download a free book off the internet probably won't do anything with it. So if you really want to read it and benefit from it, you can get a paperback copy on Amazon or get it on Kindle, and then, you know, have a hard copy that you can read through and mark it up.
Well, Liz and I are certainly big fans of hard copies.
For exactly that reason, because you can flip through the pages.
Carry it around with you. You get involved with the book.
Yeah.
And then where can people follow you or, you know, like your blog? And do you have space for any athletes who might be looking for coaching?
Yeah. So my website is knightonruns.com. And if you go there, you can really find everything that I do. I have a weekly podcast called the Knighton Runs podcast, where if you kind of like some of the topics I was talking about today with how to train, you can check that out. And then I'm on Instagram at Knighton Runs. And then to help athletes, kind of the 3 different ways that I do that is through my book here, which is a great kind of entryway to the theories that I talk about and how I help runners. I also have downloadable training plans that you can get access to. You can join my community and get support as you follow those training plans. And then I do one-on-one coaching as well. You know, I'm always kind of taking on athletes if they are the right fit. But if you go to knightonruns.com/coaching, you can kind of read about what I do and apply, and we can just have a conversation, see if we might make a good fit and take it from there.
Great stuff. And we can put little references to some of those things to help our listeners in our podcast episode notes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
We'll link the website, and that way they can find everything else.
All that remains for us to do is just give our summary views on the book. Me first.
Okay, go first. I always go first, so it's your turn.
Didn't sound like you wanted me to go first there. Like, oh,
well, I'm
okay,
used to you saying
first.
like, well, you go first.
So, Run Faster Marathons: The Proven Path to PR by Chris Knighton. This is a great little book for us, filled with essential advice for marathon runners. I think it's sort of small enough and light enough that you can carry it around in your kit bag. So you can take it with you where you go, and then you can have a look at it when something occurs to you. I was thinking the other day when we'd finished our marathon pace training run to just sort of check something up in the book. And it's the sort of thing you can carry with you as a handy reference. It's highly practical. It doesn't go into a lot of history or theory, but focuses a little bit on the why and a lot on the what. My way of describing it is I like music, and I would say if it was a music album, I would refer to it as all killer, no filler, which is a compliment, just in case you can't translate that. If you want to run a marathon or improve your marathon time and maybe qualify for Boston, who knows? This is a great book to check that you've got all the ingredients to take yourself forward. So, you know, you can check your recipe against the recipe, the master recipe, so to speak. There's also a small goal setting exercise at the end, which I think it could be useful. And Liz and I have thought maybe we'll do that exercise and record it separately and maybe push that out as a little separate exercise on our Buy Me a Coffee page, bit later on. So we recommend that small goal setting exercise at the end of the book as well. So all in all, good stuff. All killer, no filler.
So I noticed that the advice in the book was very up to date in terms of the recommendations, and I liked the way that it was practical advice. So, for example, we didn't actually go into this, but I really like the suggestion about increasing mileage and keeping it the same for 3 weeks. Before then, like decreasing it a little bit as sort of like a down week, and then increasing it to sort of the next level, which I thought was super practical, because oftentimes, we have all these sort of arbitrary goals like don't increase more than 10%. Okay, fine. But then, so what should I do instead? And Chris actually outlines that very well. He even gives like ways to increase it. So that I found it's fantastic in that way, for the way that the advice is just given as very concrete examples like that. I think this book is great for coaches, not just Chris, but other coaches also, because they can suggest to their athletes this book as reading material, because I think most coaches are using these principles and they're probably explaining them one-on-one to their athletes. But here they are all in one book, and maybe it'll answer a lot of the athletes' questions, because, a lot of the things that are in the book are just things that everybody asks and that we've asked ourselves when we started running as well. It's an easy, short read. So even those athletes that don't consider themselves bookworms, I think they can get through this book rather quickly. I actually read this book right after reading Sam Murphy's book, Run Your Best Marathon. And it almost seemed like this was like the Cole's Notes version, with all the key information that you need to actually implement in your training. So all in all, I mean, it's a great book.
Super useful.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks, Chris, for spending time with us today.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. A big thank you to Chris Knighton for providing review copies of his book and spending time with us today. If you'd like to leave us feedback of how we can improve the podcast, or want to suggest a book that you'd like us to review in a future episode, please leave us a comment on our social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter we are reviews_running. Please also follow us on social media to find out about new episodes when they're released, or you can simply subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform. If you've been listening for a while and wondering how you can help us out, there are a couple of ways. If you're enjoying the podcast, spread the word. Tell all your friends, share links, etc. Let's get it out there and spread the word. Or you can leave us a review on Apple Podcast, or you can rate us on Spotify out of 5 stars. We really appreciate if you could just take time just to give us a star rating review on these things, just to push our exposure along a little bit. As you now know, we're on Buy Me a Coffee, where you can find quite a few extra audios, photos, comments, pictures of Liz's wedding this year, discussion about 3-hour marathon running and achieving it and not achieving it, all sorts of pretty nifty stuff. All you got to do is go to buymeacoffee.com, I guess it is, and look for Running Book Reviews with Alan and Liz. You don't even need to buy us a coffee. You may feel prompted to, but you don't even need to do that. All the information, all the stuff on there is free for you to look at. So go ahead and look at it and leave us a comment, so it encourages us to do more. That's it from Running Book Reviews.
Bye for now.
Bye.